Hello all. So what you're going to have now are some video clips that give you a bit of extra feedback to go with the PowerPoint for the mock exam. So this first one is paper 1, social psychology. Now I do need to let you know that I am not allowed to share the official mark scheme with you because this paper was only sat in May by the students in the year above you. So most questions, so 75% of questions, were the questions in the real A-level paper. We did take some out which you haven't covered yet because they were research methods based, and we did insert some additional questions. But it does mean that I cannot share the official mark scheme because the only reason I have it is because I'm an examiner, okay? You will get a copy of that mark scheme when I am allowed to share it, but I want to keep my job. So question 1 was a 2-mark question about what flexibility is in the context of minority influence. So pretty much everybody could identify that flexibility meant taking the majority's views into account and adapting your standpoint once you had sort of listened to these views. Fine, but for the second mark, you had to explain why that was effective. So that obviously means that the majority field listened to and are more likely to take on board your viewpoint. So the second mark was missing for a lot of candidates. It needed some further elaboration, as the PowerPoint explains. The second question was a 4-mark authoritarian personality question where you just had to describe features of the authoritarian personality. Most people were able to convey the idea that people who had this personality type were more likely to obey an authority figure and more likely to have kind of a hatred or a disrespect for those who they viewed as inferior. But not many people went beyond that. Loads of you said that it was measured using the F scale, but not many people were able to take it further. So I need you, ahead of the real exam, to look at more traits that are incorporated in this personality type. So things like black and white thinking, you can come across as pretty misogynistic, pretty racist, like extreme viewpoints, and something that's, I think I'm allowed to say, that is mentioned in the mark scheme is the view that society is deteriorating. So yeah, but there was some acknowledgement at times of like what causes this personality, so that it's a psychodynamic explanation and it comes from harsh parenting where you can't take your anger out on your parents, so you kind of project it onto the weaker members of society. That's really good. But you had to have like 4 distinct characteristics that were identifiable and in enough detail. So look, a few people have dropped marks here. And then question 3 was to outline the limitation of this personality explanation. Because it asks for a limitation of the explanation, you can't go for a limitation of the research method. So you can't suddenly start talking about the F scale being problematic because that's not the explanation. A much more effective answer is to either talk about an alternative theory that has more research support. For example, the foot in the door effect or gradual commitment as an explanation for obedience that has loads of research support, or any of the other alternative explanations, actually, location, uniform, locus of control. There are so many explanations that you could link it to. A really well answered question was when candidates referred to the fact that it can't explain obedience of mass societies. For example, why all of the soldiers in Nazi Germany obeyed Hitler. There is no way. This is a really statistically infrequent personality type, so there's no way that we can use it to explain whole populations, and therefore it is a limited explanation. That was a really good answer. Okay, now to the 16 marker, which actually was not brilliantly answered. So what I would recommend you do is, if you have got anything less than 12 out of 16 on this question, is I recommend you give it a go again, okay? Some of you might know very easily by the feedback from this video and the PowerPoint what you've done wrong. I've also put a kind of perfect answer on the PowerPoint. But this wasn't answered well, and I was kind of surprised because we had in lessons done, I think it was the 2017 paper where the question was almost identical. The STEM was different, and I recognise that this STEM is maybe harder to grasp than some about this soft play and Anthony and Julie. But like, we have practiced these techniques, so that's interesting. It kind of taught me a lot. Essentially, for the AO1, students are not linking compliance and NSI together, and internalisation and ISI, where I keep like a broken record telling you that you have to. Anytime you use a type, which is compliance, identification, or internalisation, they are types of conformity. You should link it to an explanation of conformity, which is NSI and ISI. There was also a lot of confusion over explanations of conformity. Compliance is not an explanation, it's a type. Okay, so you'd have to go for NSI there. I have to say, as an examiner, some of the best responses I read, they referred to NSI as more of an emotional reaction to conformity, as in, oh, I'm so desperate to be liked, so I'm going to pretend I'm going to publicly conform whilst I privately disagree. And they linked ISI to more of a cognitive explanation of conformity, i.e. I want to be right, so I'm actually going to internalise this. I'm going to publicly and privately conform, to the extent that I'm even going to conform when no one is watching, because I really want to be right, because it's actually going up, it's going here rather than in my heart, like, you know, desperation to be liked. I know that's not something we taught, but I thought that was a really useful way of approaching the two things in different ways, emotional versus cognitive. So that's something that I will incorporate into my teaching next year. Loads of people totally misunderstood and misidentified Anthony and Julie's explanations. So read the PowerPoint carefully, try again. The structure on some people's was really weird as well. They were just sort of flailing at straws, grabbing anything they could. Do a bank of AO1, and then a bank of AO2, and then a bank of AO3. Or go AO1, AO2 for NSI, and then AO1, AO2 for ISI, and then all the AO3. But don't just keep going AO1, AO3, AO2, AO3, AO2, AO1, like randomly. Give it some sort of structure. And the other thing that you're suddenly all doing is failing to signpost. All AO3 should be signposted. In evaluation of this theory, Schultz did a study. In evaluation of this theory, Lucas did a study. The other thing that has started happening is that AO3 is not being linked back to the question. And my team leader was so critical of this across the whole country. Students are not saying what that study means about conformity, and that's really, really important, okay? So if you're using Schultz and that TAL study, what does that actually mean about conformity? So it shows that NSI is a more powerful form of conformity than ISI. And what does Lucas's work show? Well, it shows support that informational, is that the one on informational social influence? The maths student one. Yeah, support for that explanation of conformity. So make sure that when you use an AO3 point, you are saying, number one, I signpost in evaluation of, then you put the study, and then step 3 is you link it back to the original theory. What does this mean for the question? Take it back to the question, okay? So for lots of people, it was linking AO3 back to the question that is the target. So if you want to try that one again, do, and we will remark it once you have submitted before the end of term. If not, if you don't need to, no problem.